Two.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgilia, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and joining us today is Mr. Sean O'Donnell, Assistant Chief of Public Health Services, as well as Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. Our special guest today is Vinnie DeMarco, President of Maryland Healthcare for All. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Mr. County Executive, good morning, and how are you?
I'm lovely. I'm here in Silver Spring, and I'm here at the 12th Annual Energy Summit. And I think for our press corps, we moved it forward today a little bit because I'm doing this between the Energy Summit and my having to go to a police graduating class at 1 o'clock. So this is the best time to get this in. Between today and tomorrow, 300 building owners, property managers, and developers, energy contractors, and sustainability professionals are coming together in Silver Spring. It's our energy summit and gives both newcomers and seasoned leaders in the commercial building sector a chance to explore the latest advancements in energy efficiency, sustainable practices, and emerging technologies. It's an important platform for reaching our community and an essential tool that we have to help people figure out how to lower their carbon emissions in the county. This year, the Energy Summit was sold out, highlighting the importance of helping company leaders enhance their building's energy future and meet compliance requirements. I want to thank our Energy Department of Environmental Protection, headed by John Monger, as well as our work of our climate action teams being led by our Chief Climate Change Officer, Sarah Kogel-Smucker. The theme of this year's Energy Summit is Beyond Benchmarking, Navigating Energy Performance. A lot of the focus of this gathering is on our BEPS legislation, which is the Building Energy Performance Standards, and the regulations that come with them, as well as working with our business and nonprofit communities on implementing them. This week, we received some good news on BEPS. The Maryland General Assembly passed House Bill 49, Building Energy Performance Standard alterations. This bill will revise the state's building energy performance standards law in a few important ways. MDE, Maryland Department of Environment, now requires to certify Montgomery County's BEPS program and to waive the requirement for covered buildings in Montgomery County to comply with the statewide program. So the short way of saying that is Montgomery County's programs is intact and a little bit different than the statewide program. This makes it official that building owners only need to comply with one program, our BEPS program. And that was a source of confusion and consternation for building owners if they were going to be asked to comply with both the county and the state standards. And what do you do when they're in conflict? One of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases is our buildings. If we're going to hit our goals of 100% reduction of greenhouse gases by 2035, we need these legislative and regulatory efforts. Beyond our buildings, we're committed to helping businesses and residents to be more sustainable in their waste practices. On Friday, we announced the expansion of our recycling program to include electronics and batteries. Residents will soon be receiving a mailer on when you will be able to begin collections in your neighborhoods. We have a lot more Earth Month events and activities in the upcoming weeks, including our 10th annual celebration of Tree Montgomery on April 25th, and our annual Green Fest gathering at the Marion Friar Plaza in Wheaton. We're living in a time when our federal government is working under the theme of energy dominance. That very basically means they're implementing everything they can to do to sell off federal lands for coal mining, oil drilling, and natural gas exploration. This is truly bonkers. I mean, first place, energy companies aren't going to pump more fuel into the market than the market can consume. A number of energy executives have said this, they don't see the drilling as a panacea for anything because if you've already saturated your market, more oil just drives down the market price. So as in many things that relate to different commercial sectors, the supply is often regulated by demand, and nobody oversupplies because oversupplies reduces the price. So I don't expect any massive oil drilling in order to lower the prices of oil. That would be defeating for the purposes of the oil companies. And it's baffling that after a week after we saw horrific storms and flooding tear through Ohio Valley, killing and impacting Americans residing in one of the reddest of the red jurisdictions, every Republican from President Trump to county commissioners are scared to utter the words climate change. These are not normal things that happen any more than the flooding in the Appalachians was a normal thing that happened earlier. These are things that are products of a changing climate and intensification of the storms. And, they like to say that, people can run, but they can't hide. You can pretend there's not climate change, but you do it at your own peril. Unfortunately, if this was only at the peril of the people who are peddling this nonsense, I probably wouldn't care, but their peril is our peril, and the damage they're doing to everybody in our community and other communities is a real source of concern for us. Last month, when we talked about the updates to the climate action plan at Walt Whitman High School, I was inspired by the conversations and questions from the young adults who were there. It was really encouraging to hear people talk about this, to be engaged in it, to want to work on it, and to have that understanding that, this more than anything is about their futures. I mean, many of us older adults, our time is always limited, but you've got people with, 50, 70 years of life to go. And this is the future that they're going to be walking into, and it's not a pretty one. The war on climate change is just another part of the current war on science and an existential threat to our existence that too many people are deliberately ignoring. This really, truly is another effort to ignore the science. And we will no doubt see changes in reporting on climate change and squashing of any research on the health effects of having an unhealthy environment, just like they're squashing research at NIH right now. So I expect squashing of evidence gathering to continue, because the only way you can avoid regulation is to not be able to make a case for regulation. And that's what this administration is trying to do. Make it possible that we don't know. And if we don't know it, we can't regulate it. How beautiful is that? So work in Annapolis for the Maryland 2025 General Assembly wrapped up on Monday. Lawmakers took on a $3 billion deficit and produced a balanced budget. It was a very tough session with a lot of very difficult choices. I want to thank the work of the Montgomery County delegation and all the state leaders who took on this challenge. They really delivered pretty well for Montgomery County. And I'm really excited about some of the additional funding we'll be seeing. And I'm glad they were able to put money in for the blueprint. So we're going to be reevaluating, as we said we would, what we're going to do budget-wise once we get ourselves to the point of getting a full understanding of what's in this budget. But by next week, we will be bringing revisions forward. One thing Wes Moore made clear from the start was that this hole was not going to be filled by the middle class. I appreciate this approach because I believe that before expecting working families to pay more, it's important to look at every available way to make up the funding gap. And creating new income tax brackets for Marylanders who have the means to share more is the right way to go about doing this. We're moving away from the one-size-fits-all tax collection and adding a little bit of progressivity to it. One of the several public safety wins was a bill that better protects all of us on the road. In 2023, Montgomery County Police Department Sergeant Pat Kemp was out of his car trying to put down vehicle stoppers to stop this speeding driver, and a well-known speeding driver who did this habitually. And he was targeted by that driver and actually hit by the vehicle. He was seriously injured. He could have lost his life. He lost both of his legs. It was a real tragedy, and it was a deliberate tragedy. The person who did that is in court, and I hope he spends a very, very long time in jail because he did this over and over again, and he finally almost killed somebody. Not the kind of person you want to see back out anytime soon. The Pat Kemp law will strengthen the ability to keep dangerous drivers off the road. The driver who hit him should not have been on the road that night. Our police saw this person driving wildly fast, trying to bait them into chasing him. And we don't chase speeders because we often run the risk of creating an even worse accident. So we've been left without a tool to effectively stop them. The traffic stoppers were supposed to be that tool. In this case, the driver evaded them. It should have been enough to put him in jail before, and it wasn't. Hopefully, this will be the time that he gets to go to jail. While we're still unpacking the impacts from the legislation and the decisions made by the General Assembly, I just wanted to focus this media briefing on where we saw a lot of progress and good news for the residents of Maryland, improving healthcare and lowering prescription drug costs. New legislation aims to lower prescription drug costs by expanding the authority of the Prescription Drug Affordability Board. This is a measure I've been behind for a long time. We've got to stop the prescription drug companies from putting our residents between a rock and a hard place. I've known people who have to sacrifice food for their families in order to keep up with out of control drug prices. And it's still crazier when you think that you can go to Canada, Mexico, Colombia in South America, or countries in Europe and buy the very same name brand drugs that you and I pay for here, and you pay a fraction of the cost over there. It shouldn't be that way. Obviously, the drug companies no need to make exorbitant prices on everyone, and they're just fine. And we need some drug pricing that brings things down to reality. States also extended a successful health insurance subsidy program for young adults and is preparing for potential federal healthcare changes by establishing a state subsidy program and reinstating a commission to assess impacts. Despite budget constraints, the legislature resisted major cuts to vital Medicaid program. My guest today is Vinnie DeMarco, and I've known Vinnie for a very long time, I think close to 30 years. He was president of the Maryland Healthcare for All Coalition. Vinny's been on our media briefings in the past, and this morning he published an op-ed in the Maryland Matters called A Tale of Two Governors that we will put in the chat. And I encourage you to read this. In this op-ed, Vinny highlights the differences between the Moore and Hogan administration's approach and prioritization of these health issues. I'd like to welcome Vinny to say a few words about expanding these legislative victories for Marylanders. Congratulations, Vinny. And it's great to be with you on this very successful occasion.
Well, thank you, Mr. County Executive. You know, I'm a big fan of yours. And when Maryland passed the first in the nation Prescription Drug Affordability Board law in 2019, it couldn't have happened without you, Mr. County Executive, and your fellow local leaders all across the state who came together and for the first time defeated Big Pharma in a way that was significant. 2019 was the first time a state said, we are going to make sure that we protect our state and local governments and our people from the high costs of prescription drugs. Because as you know so well, drugs don't work if people can't afford them. You said it so eloquently that people are just not able to afford the drugs they need. They got to leave them on the counter when they can't afford it. And all of us suffer because 1/3 of premium costs is because drugs are cost so high for our insurance companies, and that's why our premiums are much higher than they should be. So we all suffer. And as you said, the drug corporations don't need to charge as much. They say they need the money for research, but they spend billions and billions more on advertising that we all see and profits than on research. These drugs can be made more affordable, and they need to be. Other countries have entities like this board that makes high-cost drugs more affordable. That's why they're more affordable in those countries. And thank you, President Biden, Vice President Harris, for the Inflation Reduction Act, which is making high-cost drugs more affordable for Medicare. But in Maryland, our law in 2019 allowed the board to make high-cost drugs more affordable for state and local governments. The legislature wasn't ready to give them the full authority, but right now the legislature passed the bill, and thank you, Delegate Bonnie Cullison from Montgomery County, with Jennifer White Holland from Baltimore County, Senator Dawn Guile from Anne Arundel County, and Brian Feldman from Montgomery County. The four of them got this bill through to expand the board's authority so now it can make high-cost drugs more affordable for everyone. This is historic. We joined 3 other states, Colorado, Minnesota, and Washington, that with boards with this authority. But I'm proud to say that our board is going to be the first to actually take action. This summer, I believe they will make high-cost drugs more affordable for jurisdictions like yours that are spending way too much on these high-cost drugs. Now, this should have happened a couple of years ago, and I'm glad you mentioned that op-ed today, because it should have happened in 2023 that the legislature expanded their authority, but former Governor Hogan vetoed a critical funding measure for the board and otherwise slow-walked it, so that couldn't happen on time. Thank you, Governor Westmore, for coming to the rescue, putting the funds in that board, and now the board is poised, thanks to its chair, Van Mitchell, and the rest of the board and its team, to make high-cost drugs more affordable for state and local governments, which will save taxpayers millions of dollars. And thanks to this new law, which we are very hopeful Governor Moore will sign very soon, they will then have the authority to make high-cost drugs more affordable for all Marylanders using a tool called an upper payment limit. We can't affect the price of the drug. That can't be done by the state, but we can affect what we pay. And that is what we're going to do with this law. It's historic. And once again, I want to end where I started by thanking you, County Executive Eldred, for all you did to make this happen in 2019 and in 2025, and all your work with the board. So thank you and your team very, very much.
Benny, you've been tireless. I mean, you've been working at, basically getting us to a one for all health system. We've got to get there at some point because there's no reason to have the disparities we have today. Is there any hope for getting rid of pharmacy benefit managers?
Well,
Another useless group of people.
the state can't do that, but the upper payment limit will prevent them from gouging us. The upper payment limit says that no matter what all these people, whether it's the drug manufacturers, PBM, everybody else wants to charge, we are only paying a reasonable amount, whether it's the insurer or the person at the counter. So their profits will be reduced and our benefit will be increased. We hear stories of people like Erica Miller, who was diagnosed with ADHD and was on a drug that was helping her. Then she got a divorce, lost her insurance, and her ability to live her life was changed. So she could no longer, she was fired because she couldn't afford the drugs that she needed. And she testified in the legislature, and people like her have made this happen, and people like you, County Executive, because the people of Maryland demand a prescription drug affordability board with full authority. And I want to thank all those legislators I mentioned, and one other I got to mention, Delegate Jocelyn Pena-Melnick, the chair of the Health and Government Operations Committee, one of the key leaders in making this progress happen.
Yeah, you got it right. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Bonnie and Brian because both of them have been good friends. And I think Bonnie's been on this forever. She's really been an advocate since she arrived at the legislature for health care. So thank you for everything you do. I guess there's still more to do. We started to get to single payer, but one step at a time.
Well, thank you for your leadership. And I really think Maryland is so lucky that you're where you are. Thank you for being there.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Members of the media, we are going to open it up for questions right now. For Mr. DeMarco, Scott Broom, there you are, WUSA 9. Questions regarding healthcare and prescription drugs. Good morning.
My apologies, I jumped the gun. I don't have a healthcare question. Would you prefer I wait?
Yes, please, if you're so kind. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. DeMarco regarding healthcare and prescription drugs? Members of the media, raise your hands. No questions for Mr. DeMarco? Well, thank you for joining us this morning, and you can remain on the call, but if you need to depart, please feel free to do so. Thank you, Mr. County Executive.
Thank you, Benny.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
It's a pleasure working with you. Really, really it is.
Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. So back to other things for the briefing. I want to talk a little bit about the council's passage of parts of the More Housing Now legislation. I don't know why they put the word now in there, because there is no now to most of the things they're talking about doing, but we'll talk more about that later. Last week, I urged the council to hold off voting on Bill 225, payment in lieu of taxes legislation or pilot legislation that applies to office to residential conversion properties. The zoning text amendment that passed was a part of the More Housing Now initiative introduced a few months ago. It didn't happen. They didn't wait, and this council moved forward with foregoing what will be hundreds of millions of dollars in property taxes over the next 20 years that would have normally been used to address many of the county's needs. That money will not be there. It would have been there if these housing units had been built by the normal process by other developers who own vacant land and have the right to develop their property, we would have generated all the tax revenue that's being foregone by this legislation. There's so many things involved in what they went forward with that are magical thinking. I'm not going to deal with it all today. We're going to come back and have a longer talk about this. We're preparing a detailed response to the legislation, but it is, at the very least, just absolutely unnecessary. Normally, we do pilots and we negotiate a pilot. And I've done this, so I know what we go through in the county. We'll talk to a developer that, if we want X number of additional affordable units, how much do we need to provide in terms of subsidy in order to get the higher levels of affordability? So we negotiate this normally. There is zero evidence that a developer needed to get no taxes as a solution to their problem. In fact, we already have 2 buildings in the county that have been converted from office to residential. None of them asked for any tax breaks, none of them. The only thing the council got out of this deal went from 15% affordable units, MPDU, moderately priced dwelling units. I keep forgetting that everybody knows acronyms. So they went from 15% MPDUs to 17.5. What that means in the layman's or in the real world is if you build 100 units, you get 3 more units than you otherwise would get at 17.5% than at 15%. I assure you that 3 extra units per 100 does not cost in anybody's real world millions and millions of dollars to provide. There's absolutely no evidence presented that 100% subsidies were needed. Absolutely no evidence presented on that. It was like, well, let's just give them what they want. And it mirrors what is now becoming the language you're going to see from developers. We just got a letter from a group of them this week, and they basically outlined that they expect the county to start subsidizing market rate housing as well. This is a sad day for the county, and it's sad that the council couldn't take the time to figure out even what the right amount of money was to give as a subsidy. No thought, no effort, no nothing to try to determine what do you need to do and what are you going to get for it. So, like I said, a lot more to say on this, but it's not a good thing. And what I want to remind our residents is that, this is part of how the county meets its budget obligations. The property taxes that come in from developers, plus the impact taxes right now, which I wish we could get rid of. All that money goes to build things that we need. And when that money's not there, 2 things happen. We either don't build the things we need, which is not a good thing, or we pass the cost on to residents. And every time we pass the cost on to residents, it makes it more expensive for them. And the idea that developers are sitting there lapping up this deal with no taxes on their lap, knowing that somebody else is going to have to pay the delta, is just a shame. And I hope, we can get enough interest from the residential community, they can weigh in with their council members to say, we don't want to give away freebies. Montgomery County is not the Rust Belt. We have far less bad. I hate those combination of words. Our problem is not as bad as other jurisdictions that have very, very high rates of commercial vacancy and that are much higher dependent on commercial property. Montgomery County is blessed in a way by having less dependence on commercial property taxes from these office buildings than other jurisdictions are. The other thing this is going to do, since it lets you take a building that's half empty and convert it, that means that half the tenants in a building are going to be kicked out. So the way we're going to encourage businesses to locate in Montgomery County is by saying, if you're only half the tenants in the building, we're going to put you out in the street and you need to go look for another place. I can't think of a better invitation to a business person than to say, so you got me kicked out of my building and now you want me to stay here. What's going to keep me from getting kicked out of my next building? Maybe I'll look someplace else. I don't think the county's thought about the ramifications of what they're doing. Other jurisdictions have tended to wait till properties were vacant or near vacant. 50% is not near vacant. And I thought we were all hoping for revival eventually in the economy where more people bring jobs here, in which case that office space would actually, A, be needed, and B, pay taxes. So it's very disappointing that the council did what it's did, but we're not going to be quiet about this. This is a serious problem. Our focus should be on doing the most we can as a government to advance affordable housing options in the county, not creating more corporate welfare opportunities that won't do enough to bring down the cost of housing in their community. And I'll point out that once again, the council got a racial equity analysis of their zoning work. And like the other cases, they were told that this has potentials to amplify housing disparities. So you got a racial equity office. The equity office is telling you that what you're doing isn't equitable. And then you proceed to do it. You don't just do it once, but you do it multiple times. You got to wonder what's the point of the equity office if it's not going to inform our decision making. But more from this in the days to come. And next, we want to talk real quickly. Last Saturday, I joined tens of thousands of people nationwide taking part in a hands-off rally. I was at the National Wall wearing my favorite T-shirt, "Science is not a liberal conspiracy." And I happened to run into Rich Madaleno. You can see him there in one of those photos. Who was down at the event as well. There were also rallies in Olney and Garrett Park and Leisure World, not to mention hundreds of rallies nationwide. Last week was one of the worst weeks in county's history, with more than 2,200 lost jobs through the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Trump administration's tariff plan was one of the only things that could have made things worse, and so he did it. Financial epic was free. The financial free fall was epic. Now families without jobs are worried about the security of their retirement. The president's approval ratings are falling as fast as the stock market. Saturday's protest events were inspiring and demonstrated that those of us who are outraged over these reckless and chaotic policies are not alone. And I think that's what we all have to remember. If you're looking around you and you think this is nuts and wondering if you're the only person who thinks this is nuts, you're not. Even Elon Musk thinks the tariffs are nuts. So I'll give him credit for one thing. But it's a sad commentary that, you're basically destroying the American economy in order to save it. And these two things are not going to work in the same direction. There was a Mexican president wrote a letter to Trump when Trump started talking about tariffs, and she pointed out that, he said, you can build your wall, but there are 7 billion people who live outside your wall. And she made the point that globally, people all over the world have choices other than products made in America. And that contracting yourself into an American shell is not going to help you sell goods abroad. And if you're not able to sell goods abroad while other companies are trading internationally, it's going to stymie American businesses here. It's just disappointing that he is so cavalier about this. And for a guy who was assuring people about no additional costs, no layoffs, no nothing, he's now produced a scene where you're going to get major additional costs, and you've put a real hurting on companies in this country. So not what he claimed, but pretty much what a lot of us expected. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about Public Health Week. For the first time in county's history, public health workers were recognized during the Dr. Alder Tillman National Public Health Week Symposium. Dr. Tillman was our chief health person in the county for a number of years. She was, when I was on the council, she was there and played a really important role in the work the county did. The gathering was meant to spotlight the vital role of public health professionals, particularly their efforts during the COVID-19 pandemic, and to highlight the 2025 theme, which was success in the community. It starts here. The theme reminds us to work together to help everyone understand the importance of preventative measures. 2025 county health rankings found that Montgomery County is one of the healthiest places to live in the state and the nation. We should acknowledge that we do have access, but we can also improve. But our county health officials, hospitals, and community-based nonprofit providers and other stakeholders continue to prioritize improving those health outcomes. Too often, the work done by our health professionals goes under the radar. During the pandemic, one positive aspect of such a dismal time was seeing our community rally behind these hardworking professionals who were up to the task despite the high stress levels, uncertain conditions, and watching so many people die. I would add to that, they put themselves at risk. I mean, at the very beginning of COVID, we didn't have masks, we didn't have gowns. People were using homemade masks. We were using masks that were not fully certified. The health professionals, they didn't call in and say it's too dangerous to go to work. They went to work. They saved lives. They put themselves at risk. They got COVID themselves. They didn't threaten not to work. They did the job they were supposed to do, and they helped the people that they were out there to serve. And if you don't have a higher appreciation for the health professionals after what they did during COVID-19, I think you're missing something. They really did the kind of work that most of us didn't have to do. I mean, everybody was in Zoom meetings, white collar work was Zoom work. Nobody had to put themselves at risk to do their job. These folks put themselves at risk, and I think we all owe them a debt of gratitude. Montgomery County continues to be committed to health equity and making sure that everyone has access to the same level of care, no matter what their economic status, no matter what their religious beliefs are. We have several community initiatives to focus on outreach to specific segments of our population, such as Latinos, African Americans, and Asian Pacific Islanders. Every week, Montgomery County Public Health leaders join me on this call. They work tirelessly to help our community and to protect it from communicable diseases and chronic ailments. They help seniors, expectant mothers, families in need, and people without shelter or healthcare coverage. Their work helps uplift our community, and I couldn't be prouder of the work that they do on behalf of all of Montgomery County residents. Before we open this up to questions, I'll turn it up to my team for a health update, and then I'll be right back.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. And thank you again for joining us yesterday at the symposium. At a time when many of our colleagues across the federal side are feeling not supported, and the medical science and public health resources are being questioned, we feel appreciated in Montgomery County, and we feel supported in Montgomery County. I want to also thank the council for recognizing Public Health Week at their session yesterday. Thank Dr. Georges Benjamin for coming and being our keynote speaker. He is the president of the American Public Health Association. Dr. Garvey, Carol Garvey, who was a health officer with Montgomery County back in the late 90s, early 2000s, who joined us as well. I want to highlight a few other things we're doing this week. Tomorrow, there is a free webinar that is being hosted by our partners at Fire and Rescue Services. They've been a tremendous partner to public health, and they will be talking about driving change and building resilience. I'm going to name a few things, and I'm going to put them in the chat, some links in the chat if people are interested in joining. This week is also the beginning of the National Black Health, National Black Maternal Health Week. That starts on Friday. As a result, on Saturday, we have two events that we're supporting. This is the 5th annual Right from the Start Health Fair and Community Impact Awards that is occurring at Holy Cross Hospital in Silver Spring. And it's supported by not only our HHS Babies Born Healthy initiative, but also our African American health programs. We are also at 11 a.m. Dr. Davis, our health officer, will be doing a walk with the doc event that's also beginning at Holy Cross Hospital, and I'll put up a registration for that. But residents who would like to come and get a little exercise and ask our health officer questions will be able to do that. This is also Autism Acceptance Month, and there are a few programs that I would like to highlight. Give me just 1 second. So the first program is the Autism Waiver Service Coordination Program, and that's designed to provide community-based, long-term, person-centered therapeutic services and support to eligible children and youth, ages 21 and under, with autism spectrum disorder, to enable home and community living as an alternative to institutional care. Montgomery County's Health and Human Services provides service coordination and case management services for children approved and enrolled in the Autism Waiver Program via a contract with Montgomery County Public Schools. The service coordinators link enrolled children to comprehensive services to allow them to remain in the community, including intensive individual support services, therapeutic recreation services, and family consultation. If your child has been diagnosed with autism and you would like to put your child on the waiting list to see if they're eligible for this program, I'll put in the chat the Maryland State Department of Education number to call. The second program is the My Turn program, which supports families with children starting at age 3 who have an intellectual or developmental disability. The program provides information and referral services, along with some limited financial assistance for activities such as camps, recreational programs, and swimming lessons. And swimming lessons are particularly important for children with autism, as we know that they have a propensity to gravitate towards water. Montgomery County HHS is pleased to announce that with the beginning of April, the My Turn program has been expanded. Its age limits from 13 to 18 years old, and this will allow additional guidance and resources for youth and their families as they prepare to begin the process of transitioning out of the school systems. Again, I'll include information in the chat for the My Turn program that we're trying to highlight here. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about all these great programs that we're doing and the recognition for Black Maternal Health Week as well as Public Health Week.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Dr. Sutter, do you have any initial remarks this
I
morning?
just wanted to echo the county executive's remarks about the House Bill 744 and Senate Bill 590, the Sergeant Pat Cap Act. Was really pleased that lead sponsors, Senator Nancy King and Delegate Greg Wims, were able to get it through and get it to completion this year. Look forward to the governor signing it over the next few weeks, and obviously October 1st, it'll represent a real shift in the ability to enforce some of the traffic laws around negligent, aggressive, and reckless driving. So very much appreciate all the effort that went in from our county delegation, as well as partnership even with the governor's office to get that across the finish line. So just wanted to echo those words. So otherwise, we're good to go.
Thank you, Dr. Stoddard. Members of the media? Yes, Scott Broom, there you are. Good morning. Go ahead.
Always in a hurry, always a newsman in a hurry. I've got sort of 3 lines of questioning. If other reporters object, let me know. Let me start with something that we didn't talk about yet today, which it comes out of legislation in Annapolis, this thing about incinerators and removing incentives. And I'm wondering if you have any reactions to what's occurred there, whether or not that impacts the incinerator arrangement that Montgomery County has right now. Any sort of assessment of that at all from your point of view, good, bad, or ugly?
This is one of the revenue sources we should learn to do without, and it's something the county had supported in the past. Was the legislation. This has been around for a while. It is not really considered recycling. It is not clean, and we put a bunch of toxic ash in a landfill next to somebody. It's not been a good process. So we're very happy to see the state legislature do it. We tried to talk to them about giving us a little bit of a ramp to get to the point where we're able to shut down the incinerator and make the changes. They weren't willing to do that. There are only 2 incinerators working in Maryland now, left in Maryland now, which is ours and the one up in Baltimore. So it's just another reason that we need to change what we're doing, and it's gonna cost us some money in the short term, but it also means that makes the incinerator far less viable than it was for the owner, or for the operator, I should say.
Okay, let's move on to this development tax incentive debate that you had a lot of words about and a long history of debating with the county council over. Could you explain to me why do these incentives not bring more affordable housing development to the county? I mean that's the essential argument.
They don't ask for it. They don't ask for it. You don't get what you don't ask for. He could have put, they make all this big deal about attainable housing and the more housing now, and we're going to put everybody's going to have to build all these units if they exceed a certain number of units, but not a single unit's put into this development. So when people tear down these buildings and pay no taxes, you were giving them so much more money than what was needed to make these projects viable, that it's a joke. And if you're giving away that much money, you should at least ask for something decent in return. They didn't even do that. So it's just really unfortunate. And, you know, most of the arguments just like not fact-based. One of the ones that really bothers me is they're treating this as if somebody builds this is new housing and it has no other effect on the market. And it's like, they don't understand markets. Housing is built based on what the demand is in the market. Montgomery County has been going through a freeze because for the type of housing that gets built here, the price of housing that gets built here, which has been mostly luxury, there's not all that much demand for it. You've now seen 3 high-rise owners go back to the planning board and flip their projects to not high-rises. This is a problem I've complained about for years now, that we've overzoned for high-rise. So the demand is what the demand is. That demand will either be satisfied by somebody converting an office building to housing, or it'll be satisfied by a developer taking one of their lots that's zoned for, you know, the same number of units or more and building housing there. But you're not going to get both developments for the same demand for housing. And so one of them, if it's built on an existing lot, pays all the taxes. And then now if you do a building conversion, you pay none of the taxes. So it's probably going to favor the building conversions, but it's going to leave developers who have lots they want to develop waiting for further or later growth in people seeking housing here. So it's, you know, pretending like this is net new as opposed to just replacing housing someplace else is just an economic fallacy. And they made that fallacy over and over again.
And finally, on the energy summit, which we may get to and try to cover tomorrow, even though we couldn't do today's event.
Cool.
What is it that local governments can do to promote these efficiency things in development? You know, efficiency on the front end saves a building owner and operator money in the long run and reduces carbon, right? That's the essential broad, right? Why is the county hosting this thing? What does the county do for these builders and others at the local government level that promotes this efficiency? And why are you so heavily behind it?
So you can't achieve any climate goals if the built environment doesn't change. The built environment contributes almost half of your greenhouse gases. So if you don't change the built environment, we're just stuck. We'll never attain anything that we're trying to attain. And that just means kind of unending global warming. We were already at a point where, you know, we're beyond the tipping point. We have broken the balance. And so things are going to get worse. The thing is, like, we should stop piling on and making it worse than it already is. We provide incentives. The Green Bank can provide loans. Green Bank's been able to leverage their money on about a 5-to-1 ratio. So they're able to find other lenders and can help put together financing packages that are advantageous. There are obviously all kinds of there are credits in the tax code. Just buying a new HVAC system opens you up to depreciation credits as well as investment credits. And then they're the same whether the energy is gas or electric. So there's a lot of stuff out there to incentivize it. There's lower operating costs in the long run for people. I know that there have been a couple of projects done by one particular developer. We were at his groundbreaking, I guess last year, and he was very clear that it was more cost effective for him to build a clean new building than to use traditional gas boilers or oil heat. So, and certainly than electric. So he's, there's plenty of cases that are examples now of people making savings by doing these changes. And they're here to, we're here to help incentivize it. Also to educate people, because a lot of people don't know what's available, either in terms of technology or in terms of financing programs. So it's a bit of education, it's a bit of incentive, and it's a bit of get to see other people who've done it, because nobody's a better witness or testimony for why this works than somebody who's done it on their own building can say, I did this and it made sense. It's lots of different things.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Jeannie Bixby, Bethesda Today. Still good morning, Jenny.
Good morning, Lorna. Hi, Mark. You spoke at
Lorna
length.
gets good morning and I get hi, Mark.
Good morning, Mark.
Just joking.
Uh, I see you in person more, Mark. But I obviously you went into great depth about your opposition to what the council passed yesterday, which was a surprise to no one. While you can't veto zoning text amendments, the pilot program was, as far as my understanding, regular legislation.
Yep.
Do you plan to veto that?
Are you a betting person?
I'm not sure if I can say it as a reporter, but
That's true. I think you get an idea where I'm going. I haven't had the bill.
when will we have a better understanding of this plan that you've been kind of teasing this morning?
You'll know after the weekend as we get close. I haven't seen the bill yet, so I guess it's got to be presented to me. I've got 10 days. I'm pretty sure I'm going to veto it. I don't see any reason not.
And
It's,
alongside that, you have additional plans to push back against what else was passed.
That's the irony. I'm totally in favor of what they did on the zoning. I thought, there's nothing wrong with making it as simple as possible. You already have the building. The law allows them to stay within the height and density of the zone, which is what you should be allowed to do. So I could care less about that. The easier we make it as possible. I don't think this should be subject to a separate approval by the planning board. The person should be able to very quickly go from what they've got to a new plan and be able to get to work on it. We shouldn't figure out how many more exactions we can get out of them. We should just facilitate the transaction. So I have no problem facilitating the transactions. But everything else I said, I still stand by. I don't think this is a net increase in housing. It's just a housing unit or group of units that'll be built in different places. And the only difference between this and what otherwise will happen is everybody else's property will pay taxes and these people will not pay taxes. And their exemption from taxes is not anywhere close to the economic needs of that project, not even close.
Gotcha. Thank you.
It's the giveaway.
Thank you, Jeannie. Elizabeth Fellman, Montgomery Community Media. Good morning. Go ahead.
County Executive, just real quick, if you want to weigh in on, the tariffs that are being proposed from the Trump administration, how can we really get to the point of affordable housing when materials are going to go sky high potentially?
Well, some materials will go sky high. Not everything we use comes from foreign sources, but a lot of the construction timber apparently does. So we could expect that to go higher. I think everybody is looking at a round of increases, and the only thing you can hope for is that the president comes to his senses, if that's possible, and that pulls back from these tariffs, and we go back to a more normal world where people trade with each other. And but that's until that happens, it's going to impact all kinds of projects. We supply a lot of electronics, a lot of motors, a lot of big things like that, and no longer made in the United States. Not because the United States couldn't make them, but ironically because the United States shipped manufacturing of things that were once American made and shipped manufacturing that stuff overseas to take advantage of cheap labor. They undermined the American market long before tariffs undermined the American market. When businesses were allowed to just pick up and leave with no consequences, and then undermine, competitors who were doing business in the United States, you kind of lost the argument the day you allowed that to happen. So we have not had a very good trade policy. This is kind of a worsening of trade policy. And I just hope that at some point, maybe even other Republicans say this is a bridge too far, you need to stop. But then he'll just probably primary them and threaten them with that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Judith Hirth, the Greater Olney News. Good morning.
Good morning.
Actually.
Good
Morning.
afternoon. Mr. County Executive, I know we've talked about this several times, and in several different ways. The county council keeps suggesting that there is an urgency in this need for housing. And yet the Montgomery County Civic Federation has reached out to the county saying, please delay this. There are many individual community groups and homeowners associations who are telling me, we're not asking for this. We're asking, to please delay. Let's talk about this. Let's really make sure everything is aligned. Where is this urgency coming from in your estimation?
Well, before I say, look, there's an urgency for affordable housing because you've got 50,000 households paying over 50% of their income on housing and mostly earning less than $50,000. So you've got an urgency and a need from people who are paying way too much for housing. That's a problem. The need in other parts of that equation is far less so. And you only have to look at the fact that developers aren't building very much. Now, you could also look at the fact that you got 3 developers who are now going forward with projects that now that they got their density lowered. I mean, Park and Planning has gone on this, I don't know what you want to call it, this rampage of zoning everything for high rise, which makes housing literally unaffordable for most people. And they know what they're doing. That's why their other plans for this massive upzoning were criticized for racial equity issues. They're zoning for not the market in Montgomery County. So if Park and Planning zones for not the market and then complains about the lack of market rate housing being built, I would suggest they take a mirror, look really closely at it and say, oh, these are the guys who did it. My belief is that they should lower densities in parts of Bethesda. They should be densest around the core. The density doesn't have to be everywhere. They put too much density up in Pike and Rose. And so that's where you've seen developers walk away from the density and say, we want to do lower units. If Park and Planning really wanted to, jumpstart housing, they could look at the master plans that aren't being built out. And maybe that's where they don't have the right housing mixes to attract the people who want to live here. This is a place where they could do all this corrective action without going into any neighborhoods whatsoever. They have no interest in doing that. Andrew and them, they're all for missing middle housing or whatever they're calling now, attainable housing, except for requiring developers to do that in the projects they're building in Bethesda. So instead of adding a requirement for this kind of housing, they refuse to add a requirement. So you've got low income housing and then you've got incredibly expensive housing. So it's, if the demand were there, then you would see more housing being built. So the fact that you're not seeing a whole lot of housing being built is probably indicative that developers aren't getting a signal that they should provide more housing. There are literally, Judy, 80,000 units or more that have already been zoned for, and 31,000, I think it's actually more than that, but at least 31,000 that have been approved, and all they need is a building permit. So instead of asking questions about what do we do about that and how do we wind up with so many approved buildings not being built, they've just decided to rip apart the neighborhoods. But of course, most of what they're ripping apart is on the other side of the county, not on the protected side of the county.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Members of the media, any additional questions for the county executive or officials this afternoon? No more questions? Going once, twice. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.